Hi, welcome to Response, a talk about true worship. I'm Johnny Zacchio, and today we have a special episode with a very special guest, and we're going to talk about a variety of different topics. When it comes to traveling and leading worship for women's ministry events, it's just going to be an exciting time, so stick around. Today on Response, we have with us a very special guest. Her name is Gia Lucid. I'm hoping, did I say that right?
Yeah,
okay,
you did.
perfect. We have Gia Lucid, and thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you if you can kind of just give us a rundown of just, a little bit about who you are, your experience in worship ministry, and how long have you been involved? When did you know the Lord was calling you, and where are you now, and what are you doing now?
So basically, you want my life story.
Yes.
I was born in New Jersey, and I grew up there. I grew up in New Jersey, and I kind of was always involved in music in one way or another. My father was a musician, and he always played at church, and so, as soon as I possibly could, he would just throw one of those microphones with the big, foam colored, screens on them, and I'd be up there singing to my, Amy Grant, accompaniment track or whatever it was. And so kind of being in front of people was always just a thing in my life, and being in church was always a thing in my life. I just always was in church and accepted the Lord when I was 5, and so and I grew up in a Christian home, and I went to a Christian school, and so the whole Christian music thing was not foreign to me. It was something that was just again part of my life. But when I was about 12, let's say 11, 12 years old, I had a certain teacher at my school, and she was just different. I didn't know how to pinpoint that. I didn't know what it was. I just knew it was different, and I wanted whatever she had. And I basically went home and I prayed. I'm like, Lord, give me that. Whatever that is, give me that. And I believe at that moment, that's the moment I was baptized in the Holy Spirit. That's basically what it was. I didn't know what it was, but that's what it was. Because within a week, I learned how to play guitar. And, learned how to play 3 or 4 chords on the guitar. And I was leading worship for my school chapel in a week and a half after.
Wow.
And I'd never led worship before. It was always, Gia on a microphone singing Amy Grant or Stephen Gers Chapman or
right.
Just performing these weird songs. And so that's when I started leading worship. I never thought that leading worship was something that people did for a living, or I didn't think that would ever be a career choice. I wanted to be a chemist. I thought I was going to go to college. I was like that crazy nerdy student that loved science and took all the advanced classes, just wanted to go become a chemist. But my church in New Jersey, I went to Calvary Chapel, Old Bridge, in my high school years. And basically I'd been working there part-time, summers, and whenever I got off school, I'd just go over there and work in the worship ministry. And they had me leading worship actually for the adult services since I had been 14, 15 years old. And when it came to my senior year and I was thinking about what to do with the rest of my life, they were like, hey, we want you to come on full-time. So come on as a worship ministry intern and do this. And I'm like, okay. So I didn't go to college. I know, it's kind of sad. I don't know that I really regret it. I don't know that I really regret it. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish I did, but not really. And I just went on full-time staff in the worship ministry there, and it was cool. And I met a ton of people, and September 11th happened during that time because I graduated high school in 2001. So that was in June, and then September 2001 was, when that happened, when September 11th obviously happened, 2001. And that was kind of my school of ministry, because we were just driving, like not really driving. We would take the train into the city at 10 o'clock at night sometimes. There was like a 24-hour like rotation of people who would just be in the city in Union Square, which is just a park. It was the farthest south we could go, the closest we can get to Ground Zero. And we would just be there ministering to people and singing with people in the middle of New York City. And I would be like on a 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. shift, and hundreds of people standing in the middle of New York City singing Amazing Grace was weird. Like, it was just, I can't even explain how crazy it was. And just being able to hear people's stories and pray with them, like, that's just not something that happens. And it really does train you, it doesn't happen every day, and it really does show you what ministry really is. So I got that crash course in ministry, and during that time I met, I already knew Pastor Brian Roderson, and I didn't have that many connections in California, except for probably him and maybe Scott Cunningham. I might have known him already. I don't remember. But I'd met a band called Scarlet Hope. I'd met, just random other people from California, a lot of them from the Chino Hills area. And we became friends through that ministry time, because we were ministering together in New York City. I mean, like, you get close to people that you're serving with. Things happened in my life. I had to go back to New Jersey because my mom was sick, and she ended up passing away. And then my life was in limbo, and I didn't know what I was doing with my life. And out of nowhere, I get a call from Pastor Jack Hibbs at Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, saying, "We want you on staff. What do we have to do to get you on staff here?" And at the time, I had no job, really. I was just traveling, and I wasn't working because I was taking care of my mom, so I had no money. And so that was, like, crazy. That was a blessing. And I have, like, a freakish unicorn job, because I work for a pastor, and basically, like, he wants me to travel and do my own stuff, but he also wants me at the church. So, they work around my schedule, basically. Like, I'm committed to 2 Sundays there. I'm committed to, whatever responsibilities I might have, be it, rehearsals or choir rehearsals or whatever. I'm in certain special events, but he almost gets concerned if he sees too much of me, because then he's thinking, why aren't you traveling and doing what you've been called to do, kind of thing. So it's really a blessing. Like, they are so generous, and they take care of me like ridiculous. Like, they're amazing. Cool. And so that's where I am now. I'm still there. I've been there for 9 years or so, and I love working at Calvary Chino Hills. I'm only one of the worship leaders there. And
that's what you are, right? You're an on-staff worship leader.
Yes.
As well as you just coordinate different parts of the, like, kind of give us what you normally.
Technically, my job description is I'm a vocal director. Like, that's what I'm called. Even our other worship leader that's on staff, he's not just a worship leader on staff. He's actually our worship ministry director. Oh, so cool. He's a worship ministry director. I'm the vocal director in a sense. So I kind of, I help the worship leaders out if they need it, but I also I run our choir. Cool. And if there's any direction needed as far as background vocalists or whatever, I kind of assist with that. But I'm also a worship leader.
Oh, great.
At the church.
Is Pastor Morgan still over all of that as well, or no?
Morgan is more or less an administrative pastor, but he's still, like, our overseer creative arts pastor as well. So cool. There's a lot of stuff we get done without having to go to him, but, he's always in the loop and kind of, cool. Overseeing everything. So
great. And so now you're saying you're called to travel. You travel around. You lead worship at various different places. And one of the places that this is actually the first time I ever heard about you was my mom. She would always go to the East Coast Pastors' Wives Conference. Yeah. And she would always go home and be like, Johnny, listen to this CD. You got to hear Gia and all these things. And that's how I found out about you. And so give us, like, kind of a rundown of, like, these Pastors' Wives Conferences, because I'm pretty sure you've done almost every one ever in existence.
I met your mom, though. It was at Calvary Old Bridge's women's retreat. I don't think it was
no way.
Yeah, I don't think it was a Pastor's Wives, because she's the Bronx, right? Yeah, Brooklyn, Bronx, Yonkers, wherever their New York churches. They would join Calvary Old Bridge every once in a while. And so I was like 15 years old when I met her. And Mary Barrett was leading worship at the time, actually. It wasn't me, but, like, I was kind of sitting with Mary, and we were, jamming or whatever. Your mom heard me. And then in years after, I started leading worship myself. Actually, the very next year I did it for Calvary Old Bridge, and I had done, their women's retreats for many, many years. And it wasn't until, actually, Mary Barrett passed away the same year my mom did, so it was the end of 2008. So 2009 was the first year I did the East Coast Pastors' Wives Conference. Cool. And that's where the board from the West Coast Pastors' Wives Board, the Pastors' Wives from California, they heard me and said, hey, can you come do ours as well? And so
you've been doing both of theirs
since 2008.
Wow.
2009. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so now what would you say some challenges, and then some of like the fun, like the benefits of like traveling a lot and then doing like these like special women's ministry events? Like what are some of those, maybe you would say challenges?
Challenges. Women's ministry events are very challenging, especially because I'm an introvert. And women are very emotional and touchy-feely, and I'm just really not. So that's a challenge for me. Like, I know it's the Lord empowering me to do it because it's so outside my personality. Like, I'm super good one-on-one, but when there's a large group of women, like, it sucks the life out of me. Like,
I bet.
There's no other way to really explain it. But women's events, beside that, like everything else, they're kind of easy. I feel like when people come to these women's events, for the most part, there are the more challenging churches. Like, they really want to worship. So my job, a lot of times, especially at the Pastors' Wives Conference, it's kind of like I just have to start them off and they finish. Like, I don't really have to. It's almost like not working, which is awesome because I can just kind of sit back and worship. So it's really, they're my more favorite events to do are the Pastors' Wives.
That's cool.
Things. So, and with traveling, as far as traveling is concerned, I don't have very much tying me down except for Calvary Chino Hills. But I'm a single woman. And that's cool. That's fine with me. So I know that I'm doing what God's called me to do.
That's cool.
And so as grueling as the travel can get, and as much as I miss my bed and my comforts of home. Right. It's kind of fun to be able to, just go around and meet new people. And even I've made friends all over the world. Mm-hmm. And so I get to visit my friends basically for my job, kind of, like I get paid to see my friends. And
it's a blessing. It's
cool too because I end up missing Calvary Chino Hills when I'm gone too much.
Right.
So it keeps me not getting like too complacent where I am at Calvary Chino Hills, and I think I would get restless in a sense if I had to be there 9 to 5 every single day.
Right.
But when I go other places, I'm like, I miss home, and so I'm so excited to get back with, my own pastor and my people and, all of that. So
just to kind of transition just a little bit, so now being a woman leading worship for a mixed group of people, now people have different views, and I just wanted to know, have you ever run into any challenges or controversy when it comes to being a woman worship leader, where it is a very shepherding kind of role? And I know you wouldn't consider yourself a worship pastor by any means, no, because you still have godly authority over you that are male leadership. But when it comes to leading worship, like, have you run into any controversy, and how have you kind of gotten over that, like, challenge maybe, or what would you say?
I've been blessed for the most part because the main leaders, the main pastors in my life have always been like, you've been called, you get out there, you do it. And like, my pastor right now, he's my favorite. I'm sorry. He's like he's like a worship leader's best friend because he's cool. A pastor who absolutely loves to worship, and he's always sad when it's over. And every once in a while, like, I'll go a little over my time and I'll be like, I'm sorry. And he's like, why? Like, we could have gone all night, you know? So that's kind of how, he is as far as worship is concerned. And he loves when I share, he loves when I just get into it. He's great. But I have, in my traveling, I have come across some different views. But obviously, if the pastor's inviting me out to sing at their church, they know that I'm going to be up there leading their people. So I'm not invited to a church where the pastor doesn't think a woman should be leading worship at a church, But I have been told, like, not to talk or, or pray or anything, that I'll do it all. And I just really don't. That doesn't bother me. Like, that's totally fine. I kind of have this thing where it's like, people have different views. And I'm under a leadership right now at my church where I work where, he believes that I can step into my giftings and go for it and just lead the people, and he has no problem with it. And if he had different views and I was called to that church and to work under, someone who, let's say, doesn't want me to talk, then, if I'm truly called there, then, I just have to submit to that, and that's totally fine because I don't need to do that to lead worship. But those are really the only challenges that I've come across. It's been a somewhat smooth ride.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's really cool. No, it's good. I think it's good for people to hear from a woman's perspective, kind of like being involved in that whole thing. I think it'll really clear up some things, or even just, I know I was talking to a girl recently who was like, man, I feel like if I'm leading worship, am I abusing this authority? And I had to, like, just, encourage her, just like, it's not like you're stepping above and over and usurping male authority that God has given to the church. It's not like that's what you're doing. You still have that covering, but you're just stepping into that gifting to still, with your musical gifting, shepherd people through the vehicle of music to a place of worshiping God. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
So I think that's really good that you cleared that up. And
I think girls get timid because of that too. Like, and they're not, stepping fully into their gifts because they feel like exactly like the girl did, like you said. We overthink it, I think, sometimes, and we think it's more of a controversy than it needs to be. And just simple communication with leadership often clears all that up. If it's cool with your leadership, then go for it.
That's cool.
Figure out what's right.
That's a real good practical thing.
Yeah,
just like communicate with them. That's good.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And now when you're leading worship for these women's ministry events, what is different when it comes to planning your set list? Just getting very practical, like, as opposed to leading for a mixed congregation, like large group, visitors, all these things that you're playing into it. But then when it comes to like a pastor's wives conference, is there any difference when it comes to planning your set list or anything like that?
There's not much different.
Okay.
The only big difference is I can relax on the keys a little bit, because the key of a song I can do a little lower, a little more relaxed with the ladies. I mean, sometimes my adrenaline pushes me a bit higher, so I'll, choose kind of on the higher end, but still good for a girl. But when I'm doing mixed, it's kind of the same thing. I'm kind of thinking, okay, there's guys in here. Can they chill, on the octave lower than me? Like, are they going to be okay? And I'll test that out with some friends sometimes too. And no one's ever going to be happy with everything as far as key is concerned. So there's always a couple songs where it's a little low for the guys or whatever. But I do my best to try to make it good for whoever my audience is. And just knowing your audience is probably the most important thing.
Okay, cool.
But when you travel, you don't always know your audience.
Yeah, so how do you kind of play? So it's more so you're focusing on key selection rather than song selection?
No, that's just part of it. But this part of it, it also is not just for women's stuff, it's for mixed as well, because, every church kind of has a different database of songs. My preference is, people hate this. The media people always freak out when I do this, but my preference is, hey, can I just come a little earlier and look at your Pro Presenter database? I just want to look through it. And I'll even type in some titles to see if they pop up, and if they do, or I'll look at their most recent songs that they've sung. Okay. And I'll try to choose a song list that's mainly from something that they're super familiar with.
Oh, that's cool.
But I might teach a song. Like, if I really feel like the Lord wants me to teach them a song or do one that's newer or not as familiar, I'll do that, but I'll, just really teach it. I'll, really deliberate about teaching the song in that case. But yeah, I like to be sensitive because I don't want to just go there and sing and have no one come with me.
Yeah.
So So that's kind of a big deal too.
Okay, of course. Yeah, that's really good. That's really practical. I mean, even just for me, I'm just like, that's a great idea to like go look through the database. Like, that's so cool.
Yeah, I sometimes people are like 2 weeks before I get there though, and they're like, "Can we have your set list?" And I'm like, "I don't even know what set list I'm doing tonight." I'm like,
Yeah.
I can't think about this right now. I try to be as accommodating as I can be, like
Right.
even in sending like, maybe I'll send like 8 songs and be like, I'll probably choose from here, but I may change depending on what you have in your database, like 1 or 2 songs or
cool.
whatever,
That's a good idea
just to
too.
give them a heads up. But also, I think like as worship leaders, like I don't know if you deal with this, but we have our favorite songs, and sometimes we just decide that we just always want to do those songs because we know them and we do well
Yeah,
with them and we
totally.
like them. Um, I really try to be sensitive to the Holy Spirit about
That's good.
what he needs to be said, how God wants his people to be led,
Mm.
and even bringing them on a journey in the list, like having them make sense, like if there's a start, there's a middle, and there's a finish to this set list.
Yeah.
So that's, I can talk for hours about that.
No, I love that. I love that subject. It's like that journey where people are getting to that place of intimacy with Christ.
Yes.
And you're almost leading them to that place. And it doesn't all just happen all at once in the first song. It's like it's towards the end. I think that's so cool.
Yeah.
I love talking about that. And I guess I just want to end by just asking, like, what exhortation or, like, encouragement would you give to worship leaders out there that aspire to travel and to lead worship, or even do what maybe you're called to do? Maybe they feel the same calling on their life, like.
This makes me want to step on a soapbox.
Go for it.
I I feel like we've become a culture of worship leaders who want to be the next Phil Wickham. And I used to teach a school worship. I didn't add that in my first story. It was already too long. I taught a school of worship for about 5 years, and I still fill in now and then. But, I look at these young, out of high school, kids, and they want to worship the Lord, but they think that means writing the next hit song, and that they think that means going to tour and do concerts or play at different churches. But that's not necessarily what worshiping God is. And one person's role as a worship leader might look extremely different from my role as a worship leader. I started out doing children's worship and doing, school chapel worship. And basically my heart in starting out leading worship was, I'm just going to be available. I'm going to be available. And because I was available, when September 11th happened, I was on a train at 10 o'clock at night into, the city to worship with hundreds of people in Times Square. And because I was available, children's ministry said, we need people. And, I ended up growing so much in that time of my life. And because I was available, I was just asked to, come out to California to, lead some songs. But what if I just stayed in New Jersey and just, if I was called to Calvary Chapel Old Bridge for the rest of my life, like, that would have been fine too. If I was called to stay in children's ministry for the rest of my life, that would have been fine too. And I would love to get back to that heart, as worship leaders, to just be available and, just let the Lord open the doors. And if he doesn't open the doors, don't pursue them. Like, just pursue worship.
Amen.
Just pursue glorifying him. And let him, show you the way and guide you in where you go. I was reading today, in Colossians. My poor Bible got soaked.
Oh man, dropped in a lake.
You read the whole book of Colossians, and then all the way at the end, like literally ends. Like there's 2 verses left. And, Paul basically goes, "Oh, hey, and say to Archippus, take heed to the ministry which you have received in the Lord, that you may fulfill it." And that's all he says. Like, it's just this little interjection, in the middle of, this letter, at the end, very end of this letter, like, "Hey, do me a favor, go tell that guy." It's like the Lord showed him, like, he's not necessarily heeding to his calling completely. And he's calling Archippus to step out into the calling that he's been called to, that he may fulfill it. And so I know for a lot of the timid, girls out there, like, that's a verse that I use a lot, because I feel like the Lord's called me to kind of not only tell women, but anybody who's been called to worship, like, get over yourself, stop being so, like, scared and so timid. Like,
take a step. Yeah.
if you've been called, step into it and fulfill it, type
That's
thing.
good.
So anyway, I was just reading that today.
Praise God. That was great too. Thank you. Encouraging everybody who's going to watch this. I'm sure it's going to be amazing. So thank you so much. And
Sure.
um,
Thanks for
yeah,
having me.
of course.